Well, it's Rutgers week, folks. Seton Hall final non-conference tune-up against the Scarlet Knights, coming off a one-on-one week where good news they beat NJIT, but a slow start against Oklahoma State and a ferocious comeback where it looked like they were gonna close the gap to a two-possession game. They just failed to do that after cutting it down to 7 late. And they lose to the Cowboys to fall to 5-5. But joining us to preview the 10th annual since the trophy's been introduced, Garden State Hardwood Classic. He was here last year with us. He added the extra preview for the Baylor game because it was in the same week, but we're going to focus it in just on this battle for the Garden State. It is none other than a friend of the show, of course, Adam Zielonka. Adam, good to get you back on the show. I know we had met finally in person at Big East Media
Yeah.
Day a couple months back, but it's good to get you back here on Hoist the Colors this week.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate being on. Appreciate you asking me to join you this week. Obviously, one of my favorite weeks of the whole year, being a Jersey guy and not having ever really picked a side in the rivalry of Rutgers versus Seton Hall growing up. It just makes it all the more fun for me to be around it in a journalistic capacity and cover this game.
Well, I mean, let's start with the Pirates and them coming in 5-5. There have been there have been glimpses of greatness, like the 2-1 run in Charleston, and then they follow that up by getting beat by an 0-8 Monmouth team and underwhelming against a lot of opponents, including starting off terribly against Oklahoma State and digging themselves too deep of a hole that a 9-point game, like that was the best they could unfortunately do. What's been your assessment of the Pirates this year and going into a, their first real road game of the season at Jersey Mike's Saturday afternoon?
Well, I'll tell you what, my original assessment of Seton Hall was quite simply like the thing our eyes were telling us. Put simply, they couldn't score the ball to save their lives. It was funny to me when I covered their loss against Fordham at Walsh Gym, and one of the reporters asked, "Okay, what do you guys need to improve on?" They just scored 56 points against Fordham,
Mhm.
and they're like, "Well, our defense, because the defense is their identity. It's like everything starts with our defense. We need to defend better." They didn't have much of a problem defending Fordham that game. If you allow 57 points to a low major, you probably should win that game. I think everybody here agrees.
Yeah.
So for a month, I mean, they have had one of the worst scoring offenses in Division One. And then this all got turned on its head in the Oklahoma State game because the defense came out absolutely flat on Sunday and just they were digging out of a hole the entire rest of the afternoon, even when their offense did actually wake up. And guys like Coleman and a few other players are figuring out how to put the ball in the cup. So I just there's no one thing that it's everything. They've been so subpar in basically almost every area, and I'll tell you some things in a little bit later in the episode that I think they're doing well, and that the stats would say they're doing well. But it can no longer just be pinned on the offense after the way that Oklahoma State game went, which I think shocked a lot of people. If you're going to lose that game, based on how November went, we would have probably guessed you lose that game 66-50, right, and not what it turned out to be.
Well, Pat, I know you were in the building. I want to know what your thoughts were on the game.
Well, the one line that came out after the game, I forgot who triggered this quote was Holloway made the compare. Holloway's been talking all season about I want to play a 10-man rotation. I want to play an 11-man rotation. And then he makes the comment that, just because I think I want to play 10 or 11 guys doesn't mean I should play 10 or 11 guys. I think I said that either in our episode before, on the Hoist the Colors episode before the Charleston Classic, or I said it on our guest appearance on Daily Dose of Hoops, where just because you can play 11 guys doesn't mean you're going to get good performances from, let's say, the 8th, ninth, 10th, or 11 guys. Uh, Emmanuel Okorafor, for example, only plays 3 minutes on Sunday. And the reason for that was that he could not get back on defense. And when you can't get back on defense, that just means you're not into the game. So, good off to the bench for Emmanuel Okorafor. Then you got Chauncey Jenkins on Sunday, who the rumors Holloway had mentioned that he had a knee injury. So if he's got a knee injury, is he able to play or not able to play. So he puts Jenkins on the court for a few minutes. Jenkins does not look nearly like himself, and Jenkins goes back to the bench. And then you see two guys who didn't even play against NJIT on Wednesday in David Tubeck and Gus Yalden not only get to the court, but make contributions. Tubeck was doing a good job defending down low, getting a few rebounds, putting up a couple of putbacks. And Yalden, of course, had his best college game of his career with 8 points and 3 rebounds. So he's still trying to figure out his rotation. And it's a question of whether he's going to go to the players who are playing the best or the players who are giving the most effort at any given time. And I think it's unfortunate that we're 3 months into it, 3 months into the season, if you include all of the preseason stuff, that he's still trying to work on who he trusts and who he thinks he should be able to put on the court.
I mean, I can't even imagine how difficult it must be because you can't have your cake and eat it too, if I could put it that way. Because in terms of the guys who are giving the effort, like you want to reward them, the ones that like Gus Yalden, who is the ultimate energy guy. He brings it every second he's on the floor, even though he's probably going to run. He's going to get winded quicker than a lot of the other guys that are on the team. But if he doesn't produce, then you may have a guy like Okorafor who's just not getting back on defense, and you got to put him on the bench, and now you got to go to somebody else to play those minutes. So I can't even imagine how difficult it must be to tiptoe that line for Shaw and his staff, because I think it's got to be a team effort for him and the rest of the guys to figure out what are we going to do on a given night. Like, it's hard, especially when you got a guy like Scotty Middleton, who was non-existent on the offensive in the first couple games, and then he lights it up from three against Oklahoma State and plays a big part in them getting back into the game. But obviously, it wasn't enough. But now you got questions to raise. With Jenkins being hampered a little bit. I mean, where do you go with the starting lineup? Do you put Middleton in? I mean, there's a lot of questions to be asked. But I feel like, Adam, for you, I think if you're Shaw, this is a good problem to have and to navigate. You're going to have a lot more time between Sunday's game and Saturday. Having that extra time will be much more in Shaw's favor to try to figure out what the game plan should be and what the personnel should look like against a Rutgers squad that is arguably the most talented they've seen so far this season.
I have to agree. I mean, also getting that extra week, since at least from Sunday to Saturday, the better part of a week, hopefully gets Chauncey Jenkins a little healthy enough to possibly get back into the starting lineup. If you're Seton Hall, that's what you want to see. He was their most reliable scorer for the better part of the first month of this season, as you guys know. I have to agree about just the talent Rutgers presents as an opponent. It's not going to be anything like they saw in Charleston. It's not going to be anything like they've seen in some of these other games, and certainly not Oklahoma State either. Rutgers has a load of talent in the backcourt and some toughness in the form of Jeremiah Williams. Jordan Durkak brings a lot to the table. He was considering Seton Hall as well as Rutgers when he was in the transfer portal this spring, and I thought he would fit Shaheen Holloway's game at Seton Hall really well in the way that he gets downhill, has active hands on defense, makes a lot of steals, is a real true two-way player at guard. They're going to have their hands full in the backcourt. So you want to make sure you have, if you're Seton Hall here, you want to make sure that you have the most viable starting backcourt and the right rotation in line for this. How much does Garway Dual play? He had 9 assists in the Oklahoma State game. That's a pretty good showing for him, but he's only started this year when Isaiah Coleman or Dylan for a little while, and then Chauncey were dealing with an illness or an injury. That's the only times that he's put Garway in the starting lineup. So I wonder if he gives Garway another chance there, if maybe Chauncey Jenkins isn't ready to take on starters minutes yet on Saturday. You've got a lot to consider. Dylan Adewusu is going to be having to cover Dylan Harper, right, guys? Like that's going to be you've got your best defender on their best player in the backcourt. So much of it's probably going to be won in the backcourt, and that's why they got to figure out, is Chauncey healthy or is he not healthy? Are we trusting Scotty Middleton with more minutes, It is truly up and down the lineup, and the backcourt in particular, although center has been obviously a big, giant question mark all year. It's way more questions than you'd want to have this far into the season. As Patrick put it, like, you're not 1 month into the season, really, you're 3 months into the season when you factor in camp, preseason practices, and everything that they go through September and October. So it certainly isn't ideal from the Pirates' perspective there, but they have to get their act together quick, because truly this will be the most talented team that they faced so far.
On the other hand, Rutgers has not really found a groove yet, or the groove that you would expect for a team that has the roster. I think to myself when I'm watching, I've only watched Rutgers a couple of times, in part because it's just the way the schedules work, in part because, a couple of their games, for example, I don't think there was a way I think you had to find some deep ESPN stream to find the Kennesaw game. But I think to myself, I don't know, this is a weird thought. Is Steve Peichel coaching this team, or is this team coaching Steve Peichel? Meaning, obviously, you have to factor in, there's a lot to deal with when you're dealing with 2 lottery picks in Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper. Obviously, you put those guys on the court and they're capable of putting up 40, 50, maybe, depending on the circumstances, maybe even 60 points between them. And that takes you a long way to winning basketball games. On the other hand, then you have to factor in, well, do I want to be the guy responsible for them getting hurt? Are they going to give me a half an effort in certain games because, they may not want to, like the Kennesaw game was a good example of, was Rutgers definitely sleptwalked through the first half of that game down in Kennesaw, thinking that when they walked on the court with Rutgers uniforms, that meant that that just meant that they were going to get an automatic walkover over Kennesaw State, and they had another thing coming. So then they get into a game with Seton Hall on Sunday, and you're on your home court. You're playing a team that, you look on social media and people say, is Seton Hall the worst major conference team? Somebody said, my guy, Eric Haslam, shame on him for this one. The founder of Haslametrics, the great analytical site, posted a joke saying, name the worst major conference team. Seton Hall, maybe Seton Hall, definitely Seton Hall. So there are a lot of jokes, it's all out there about all the losses to Monmouth and the losses to Fordham and the losses to Hofstra and whatever's gone on so far. And, does Rutgers go in, as much as they should be focusing, this is, the game that you get pumped up for. Do they look at Seton Hall's record? Do they look at how Seton Hall has played so far and think, hey, how much of an effort do we, are they going to take it? Are they going to put the game are they going to play in second gear for the beginning of this game? And, would they have an opportunity to take it to, the top gear if they need to, depending on, how Seton Hall comes out and, how the flow of the game goes, depending on what type of effort Rutgers puts out at the jump on Saturday afternoon?
It's a really interesting question. And I think how I'd answer it is, it would be a massive failing on the part of Steve Peichel if he can't get Rutgers up out of bed to face Seton Hall. That is the rivalry game of the non-conference, at least we'll say, of the season. And more to the point, Dylan Harper isn't any 5-star freshman who came in from another part of the country. He is the brother of Ron Harper Jr. He has been to Rutgers versus Seton Hall games before. He's from North Jersey. And it was either him or Ace. It would be even more impressive if Ace said it. But there was an interview, is either the one on Fan or maybe one of the podcasts that they put out themselves, that Rutgers put out themselves, before the season. And one of the questions to them was, what game are you looking forward to? And the first, I think it was Dylan. I think he said Seton Hall, first one off, not Michigan State, not Maryland, not, whatever Big Ten rival you want to name. I think it's not entirely comparable to Kennesaw State in that way. Kennesaw State was a terribly scheduled game by Peichel, to put that 48 hours and change before the Vegas tournament. We're going to bring you on the road. It's going to be your first true road test for a freshman heavy roster. And they're going to go in there thinking, oh yeah, we can win without trying. Like you said, just second gear. We'll win this game. And they nearly did in spite of everything, in spite of falling behind 21 points to an inferior team. That was just not in retrospect, a very poorly scheduled game. You should have kept that game for December if you could, and make sure the guys are a little more seasoned. Anyway, Seton Hall, I don't know that that's analogous to Kennesaw State. It would be, I'll go back to how I started this answer. Peichel would be on his shoulders 100% if he can't get Bailey and Harper ready to go from the jump against Seton Hall, because you've got it's 4 days between, they play Penn State tomorrow, so it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 days in between. That's more than enough time, I would say. And it would just show that they're like looking at social media. To your point about the memes and the jokes, it would just show that Peichel loves to rail against, like, they got to put their phones down, they got to get off social media, they got to stop looking at social media. Every season that I've covered Rutgers for the last 4 seasons, he will say some version of that, whether they're losing or winning at the time. So it would really show that they've got their heads in their phones, which isn't good. And you have a very good point that it's a different kind of team than Peichel's ever had before because of the talent and the hype around the freshmen. All of the behind the scenes drama that went on with apparel, for instance, that we don't know the half of, but it wasn't just, they want to wear Nike. So like, we'll let it just symbolized, we'll let them do what they want to do. I think any good freshman, when I say good, I mean like any highly rated freshman coming out of high school, you can't trust that they're going to be great on defense right away. I think Dylan's been good in spurts on defense, more so than Bailey. But goodness gracious, I just can't imagine if Rutgers gets off to a slow start to that game, that there's bigger questions to be asked about the Rutgers program.
So I definitely want to bring. I mean, you bring up Dylan Harper. Do you think Ron Jr. is going to be getting in his ear about the fact that during his time at Rutgers, he only beat Seton Hall one time? That was, I mean, I don't want to say there's an asterisk, but let's be real. They don't win that game by 20 if Mahmoud doesn't have a broken wrist and Miles Powell doesn't get one of the worst concussions documented.
I wouldn't be surprised if Ron was in Dylan's ear about the importance of the rivalry. Sure. Wouldn't be surprised at all. I know Ron is following them from afar. I think the team he's on now is Boston Celtics G League team, Maine Celtics. Mm-hmm. But he's watching them closely from afar. It's that era of the recent era of Geo Baker, Ron Harper Jr., and a couple other guys from that time about 4 years ago, where they've been investing heavily in Rutgers pride, trying to make sure that the fan base rallies around the program ever since they got back to relevance under Peichel. And I mean, I don't know the Maine Celtics schedule, but it wouldn't totally shock me if somebody like Ron Harper Jr. came to the game on Saturday.
I'll throw another name out there, guys, that someone who should be invested in this matchup, a guy who maybe has not done what people have sort of expected him to, and that's Zach Martini, the transfer from Princeton. Jersey guy, knows probably is in touch with the whole fabric of New Jersey basketball. Know as much. He never got to play Seton Hall when he was in Princeton because it's been decades before Seton Hall has played Princeton. But certainly if you're in New Jersey, if you're following college basketball even casually in New Jersey, you understand the importance of the Rutgers-Seton Hall rivalry. And a guy like Martini certainly would probably is relishing the opportunity to maybe, show out a little more in this matchup than he has during the rest of the season, because that's sort of been the second issue for Rutgers, is that who do they get consistent tertiary play for? We know what Harper does. We know what Bailey's. And then, for the most part, they've been fairly consistent. You can trust on those guys putting up at least 15 points a game. They played really well against Alabama out in Las Vegas. I forgot who they beat. They won what they would. They won one game in Las Vegas, I think, and I forgot who that.
Sounds about right. Did they beat?
That was Notre Dame, I think.
Yeah,
if
Notre
I remember.
Dame.
Notre Dame, if I'm correct. It was a good game against Notre Dame, and they played Alabama well, and Alabama's clearly a top 5 team in the country. So we know on a talent level they can keep up with anybody in America. The question is, it goes to mindset. And talk about the tertiary players. You're talking about Martini, you're talking about Dunkirk, you're talking about Williams, you're talking about the whole host of Rutgers guys who, that Peichel's been hoping are going to come in and sort of, help out on both ends of the court, the two superstars. And there's been nights when he's gotten good production out of everyone on the roster but the two freshmen. And then the nights when those guys, when it's basically like, okay, it's the Harper and Bailey show, and they have 10, backup singers or backup players playing behind them. And, that's something where if Seton Hall at the end of the night only really has to guard two guys, they might be able to play reasonably well defense on Saturday night. But if you get something from Martini, if you get something from Somerville, if you get something from Durkak and Williams, that makes the challenge that much more difficult for the seat. Because that's the one thing, if you've seen some of the defensive difficulties, particularly Sunday against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's leading scorer, Bryce Thompson, I think he only had 2 points in the game. And they got scoring from people who hadn't really put up a lot of points the whole season before that game on Sunday afternoon. So that's one thing. If you get multiple players involved scoring against Seton Hall, sometimes it puts too much pressure on the Seton Hall defense. Vanderbilt did that exceptionally well down in Charleston as well, and that's why they scored the other big blowout that's been scored against Seton Hall this season.
So, you bring up a good point in terms of like you got to get guys other than Bailey and Harper to help out with the scoring. A thought that just occurred to me, and if Seton Hall was better on offense, I'd be more on board with it. Let Harper and Bailey do whatever they want and make everybody else beat you. I think that is, I mean, I'm not saying like, hey, Shaw, do this, because with the offense, you're going to have to deal with the firepower that Bailey and Harper bring to the table. Last time I checked, like each of them were in the top 50 in the country in scoring. So that's a lot easier said than done. But Adam, I want to go to you because, you've seen this rivalry and it's had its, back and forth moments the last couple of years where Seton Hall went into Jersey Mike's 2 years ago and won a rock fight of a game where neither team got to 50 points. And then last year, Seton Hall came out flat against Rutgers, and Rutgers stole one at the Rock for the first time in what seems like ages. I think that was the first time Rutgers won in Newark since, I believe, it was when both were still in the Big East back in, I think it was 2013 when it happened. So, I mean, what are your expectations and what does Seton Hall need to do in order to do the unthinkable and steal one at Rutgers and go into Big East play with a winning record?
Well, first of all, I want to commend you because I've got my notes up here. I was preparing not only for this podcast, but depending on when this drops, I want to just plug the Garden State newsletter. My newsletter, I publish 3 times a week on Substack. Tuesday's edition, by probably noon Eastern on Tuesday, I'll have out a overarching preview of Seton Hall versus Rutgers, with including keys to the game for both teams and what we need to be looking for. So anyway, I've got my game notes out. All my different tabs, and you are exactly right that Rutgers had not won at Newark at Prudential Center since 2013 when they were in the Big East together still. So you're 100% right on that. Good job. Well, Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey are enormously talented. They are high scoring. They do a lot. They're great passers. They're also still freshmen. And Rutgers hadn't been having a lot of turnover problems, but in the last 2 games, they lost 16 turnovers and 14 turnovers. One of Seton Hall's strengths, and I alluded a little bit, or I did some foreshadowing earlier, one of the things they've done really, really well all season is forced turnovers. I know they haven't played strong competition, but they rank, and I had it here, they rank something like 27th in turnover percentage as far as forcing turnovers in Division I. They do force a lot. Some of it's steals, some of it's not steals. If I were Seton Hall, and I'm no coach, they've been shooting the 3 okay. They've been shooting the 3 better. They cannot make a 2-point shot to save their lives. The problem is that under Holloway, they never try to take a lot of threes. They don't emphasize. I don't want to force a 3 if I'm a coach, but they don't emphasize 3-pointers. I just think that if they could get out and transition on some steals and turnovers and shoot for 3 instead of 2, because nobody on that team is finishing at the rim consistently all year, even if it was a one-on-one in transition or something, there's no guarantee that thing's going in. Shoot for 3. Get some turn. I watched Harper pass it to Bailey at midcourt and it was an over the back because they weren't paying attention in the Ohio State game. They're making a little bit of silly mistakes like that. So if you can apply some pressure on the freshmen still make mistakes more than the average college basketball player that's like a veteran. I would say my game plan concisely is I would want to ratchet up that pressure, force the freshmen into some mistakes. It's not just Bailey and Harper, obviously. It was Lathan Somerville. Dylan Grant got into one of the games in Las Vegas for a little bit, I think. But you get some turnovers, you get out in transition and go for three because they're not shooting the three that bad this year. They have different guys who can make threes if you just get them warmed up early. They can't make the two. I don't want to hammer that too hard, but it's been atrocious sometimes to watch. I was at the Fordham loss and I was at the Monmouth loss. Monmouth was 0-8 coming into that game.
Yep.
And Monmouth left that building 1-8. So I've seen some bad Seton Hall offense this year, and I think that they got to just try and change some things up and try to get the flow of the game. And we already talked about rotation and who should play and who shouldn't play, who's hot, who's not. But as far as just like a general strategy, I think Seton Hall wins the game if they do that. They also can't go to the foul line. That's another place where they are shooting atrociously, among the worst percentages in Division I is Seton Hall. So you want to make sure that they don't start hacking, doing a hack-a-shack and sending you to the line a bunch. Those would be my tips.
Pat, what do you got?
I'm looking at get off to a reasonable start in this game. Part of Seton Hall's problem all year, except for NJIT last Wednesday, was slow starts. They started off relatively slowly against Monmouth. They started off very slowly yesterday against Oklahoma State. The last thing you want to do is give what's going to be a sold-out house at Jersey Mike's on Saturday afternoon the opportunity to go berserk. And then you get you go back to that game in 2019. Rutgers got out quickly, and the crowd was never quiet the rest of that afternoon when Rutgers beat a ranked Seton Hall team 5 years ago at Jersey Mike's Arena. So this crowd really this is, you talk about Adam referenced Dylan Harper and saying that Seton Hall was the one game on the schedule he had circled to win. Well, those fans at Jersey Mike's Arena feel that double than Dylan Harper. And if you give them an excuse to stay in this game, stay loud, they might rattle this Seton Hall team, even though there are a lot of veterans on this team who've been in hostile billings like Dylan Adewusu and Prince Oligbe and, to even a lesser extent, Isaiah Coleman. You have people who have been in hostile environments, but there's hostile and then there's Jersey Mike's hostile. And historically, that's been a place where if ranked teams go to Jersey Mike's or Jersey Mike's Arena or the Rack to die, what's to make of a team that's 5-5 that's the furthest thing from ranked? In fact, they might be ranked in a different sense. You bring that group into Jersey Mike's, they go down 20 and turn the TV off and get ready for Villanova next Wednesday night or Tuesday night, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, they don't call that place the trapezoid of terror for nothing. Zach Edey lost, I think, 2 or 3 years in a row in that place. For some reason, he could just never win in Piscataway. But when you got to go to Jersey Mike's, dare I make a shameless plug? I'm looking at you, Danny DeVito. Seton Hall's got to play a sub above Rutgers. You got to do that. But overall game prediction. Pat, I'll start with you, and then we'll save our guest prediction. Save the best for last. Pat, go ahead.
Let's be real here. I'm going to be a little more optimistic. I'm going to go like Rutgers 82, Seton Hall 72. I do think that Harper and Bailey will force the tempo in this game because they're based. I mean, not for nothing. They're looking at their scoring averages. They're looking to impress the pro scouts that are going to be in the building and watching on television. And Rutgers has played reasonably fast all season. So I think that there's no reason why they're not going to put the pedal to the metal into this game. I do think that their defense has had some issues this season. And I think that in the one sense, this could look a lot like the game yesterday in the sense that I think the Seton Hall offense is going to continue to show you something because I do think that there has been a bolt of confidence with guys like Middleton and Coleman and even to a lesser extent Garway Dual in terms of playing offense last week. But Rutgers has too much firepower. Rutgers has home court advantage. I'm going to go Rutgers by 10.
I agree with everything you said there. I think it'll be just a little less high scoring than that, just knowing the history of this rivalry. I do agree Rutgers defense has left a lot to be desired, and it's not like the Rutgers defenses of old in the Steve Pikiell era. Though I have trouble seeing Seton Hall get into the 70s in the rack. I think what'll happen is Rutgers will lead for most of the first half. They'll get a little comfortable. They'll make a couple mistakes. Seton Hall suddenly cuts it to like a 2-possession game in the second half. And then Rutgers puts it away. I'm going to go 74-61.
Ooh, you know what's really funny? I was going through scenarios in my head, and one of which was like, I think it was 75-60 Rutgers. So we were essentially same point total, but +1, -1 the other way. But at the same time, there's also the notion I can see the Pat's optimism side because, Seton Hall, they might fall behind, and Jersey Mike's can go from, a really tough place where it just gets so loud, they're on top of you, it becomes overwhelming. But if you hit a couple silencers, that place can sound like it could become a morgue if they have these silencers. And that's the big key to winning games like these, preventing these big runs by the home team that gets the crowd into it. You want to take them out of it early, which for Seton Hall, that's awfully difficult to do. This is their first road game of the entire season. Part of me is thinking that, like, hey, they might go in there and only lose by like 4 with, a couple, like, in garbage time, if you will. They might, cut into it, make a single-digit game. But I think I'm going to stick with my original prediction where Rutgers gets to a hot start, kind of fizzles a little bit, and then Rutgers gets the big first half lead. The Seton Hall it becomes insurmountable. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to stick with a 75-60 verdict. And unfortunately, me and Pat were homers here, but unfortunately, got to stick with the better dead than red. But unfortunately, I think the bad guys are going to win. Scott Hall would approve of that. Another one for the bad guys, if you will. Or wait, no, he said good guys, but he was known as the bad guy, so it was a double-edged
Well,
sword.
not for nothing. New Jersey just trended very red. Not that Trump won New Jersey, but New Jersey trended red in the election last November. So it's unfortunately the gods are a little bit against us with how last month turned out.
I was thinking of making a political red versus blue comparison in the top of my story about Rutgers Seton Hall. I'm going to throw that out now. I think you just took it.
Nah, that would never be me. And I'm like, just make it about the game. I mean, trust me, I've had way too much of that from, this entire year past, the first Tuesday in November. Like, I'm done. I'm over it. Blue versus red will be the jerseys on the court, not talking about, the other underlying tone. So that is 3 o'clock Saturday on Fox. I mean, this is an absolute sicko showdown. The fact that it's on Fox, but I'm all for it. I know the sickos will watch it in force, including Pat and I, and a lot of Seton Hall fans and Rutgers fans in the entire Garden State. We'll be watching intently to see who wins Garden State supremacy and who, if the trophy's going to stay in Piscataway or if it'll make its rightful return to South Orange. To see the full in-depth game preview that our guest has, don't forget to check out. Don't forget to check out Adam Zielonka and his Garden State newsletter. Great content if you're a Garden State hoops connoisseur, just a college hoops connoisseur in general, to take in, the plethora of programs in the state of New Jersey, including Seton Hall, Rutgers, Princeton, Monmouth, the whole shebang. Definitely check out the Garden State newsletter. Adam, thank you so much again for the time. Always a pleasure to, get you on ahead of Rutgers and hoping for a good game and looking forward to seeing your preview and how our predictions will shake out this year.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me on. Good to talk to you both.
So that's going to do it for this week's edition of Hoist the Colors for our special guest, Adam Zielonka, and my co-host, Pat Madden. I'm Tim Best. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, onward to Tonia. We'll see you at the start of Big East play.